Welcome
Are you
back.
cutting out for me?
No. Welcome back to Aetheral.
How would you know?
I don't know, you fucked me up now. Welcome back to Aetheral Space 3.49.
I didn't hear you counting at all till it got to 1.
That's because I only realised to start at 1.
Good.
So, no,
Anyway, go ahead.
I just didn't do 3 or 2. Okay, I'm gonna make another clap now so we can cut past this shit. Hello.
No.
Well, now I've got to fucking do it again.
No, don't do any more claps.
What do you want me to fucking do then? We're like a minute in now.
Leave it in. It'll be funny. All right, now do the intro.
Hello, welcome back to Aetheral Space. Again, 3.49. What happened last time, Darnell? Please.
Well, last time, Musashi and Dragon worked together temporarily to destroy the Fifth Dead, but then Dragon absconded, and he was like, Adrian, but Noel stopped the engine, so it all worked out in the end. And then the Fifth Dead's body started like reforming with both orange and pink Aether, and Musashi was like, I'll leave it be, I have no quarrel with the Sixth Dead. And we learned that the Fifth Dead like kind of works like that, which is cool. Is that so? Now my question is: do they retain memories of their previous lives then, even if they're different? Because remember when like the only thing that really pissed it off was when I say it because I don't know if like their gender changes or how it works or whatever. Because remember Skipper was like, "I met your previous incarnation." Then he got all angry about it or some shit.
It's a good thing you're taking notice of that.
Yeah, I wondered. Do they have memories? Or, like, maybe they retain, like, the hate of, like, the last one's dying moments or something? So it kind of brought back PTSD. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, they killed the Fifth Dead. They're shooting out of there. Dragon's presumably joining his friends, but I don't know. Maybe he's just being a coward and shooting the Dawn House in the back or some shit.
The entire ship.
Yeah! That's how he diverts it away from the vent. Alright, so, yeah, we have to read this book now, don't we?
Yeah.
Dragon Hadrian did his best to ignore his conscience as he rode the elevator upwards. Usually it wasn't that hard. His better nature was very shy and tended only to come out when it was most inconvenient. Now, though, it was scratching in his mind like a dog wanting to come in through a door. He'd abandoned Musashi and Noel, it said, left them at the... It said? He'd abandoned Musashi and Noel, it said, left them at the tender mercies of the Fifth Dead. No, Dragon shook his head. Musashi was a capable warrior, no, exemplary. As much of a pain in the ass the special officer's pursuit had been, he couldn't deny that. There was no doubt in his mind that he could finish off the Fifth Dead using the advantage Dragon had given him. And besides, there'd been no obligation for Dragon to provide that assistance in the first place. By intercepting that attack from Musashi and destroying the Fifth Dead's weapon, he'd already gone above and beyond the call of duty. It would be unreasonable for someone to expect more of him. Well, he already knew Musashi was fairly unreasonable, so this whole thing wouldn't really change that much between them. Besides, he could feel that the vibrations of the engine had stopped. The ship was still as a grave, save for the obvious and sort of horrifying feeling of descent as the Dawn House lost altitude. That in itself was proof that Musashi had overcome the Fifth Dead, that he'd survived the fight. Probably Noelle had survived too. Dragon didn't really care that much for her after having plasma poured over him, but abandoning a kid to die would still leave a bitter taste in his mouth. Isn't that what you did, though? His conscience was insistent, annoyingly so. Dragon shook his head. Of course that wasn't what he'd done. It would only be abandoning them to die if they'd actually died, obviously. What he'd done was just regular abandonment. The elevator dinged as it came to a stop on the top deck of the ship. Hopefully there'd be some way of getting back up the roof from here, so he could help out Skipper and the others. And he couldn't just ignore the situation up there after all. His friends, scratch that, his crew, were in danger. Ah, Dragon! He said the friend word. He'd had no choice but to leave Musashi behind. That self-justification rang just a bit too pathetic for Dragon's tastes, though. He gritted his teeth as he stepped out of the lift. In the end, there was no need to justify his actions at all. Musashi had intended to take him back to the Supremacy, all things considered. That path would have likely ended with Dragon's death, or at the very least, a severe prison sentence. In the end, with that considered... Oh, thank God he considered it twice. All he'd done was self-defense. He'd saved Musashi's life. He had no obligation to hand his over as well. Dragon narrowed his eyes as he stepped through the hallways, banishing any lingering doubts from his mind. The only one who decides what happens to me, he reminded himself, is me. Wasn't that Skipper's speech, or was that his Dragon's speech? Oh. Ruth ducked under another swing from the Chael Thing's massive fist, wind passing over her hair as the metal hand shattered against the deck. She was beginning to get a good sense of the being's inner workings now. It was fragile, destroying itself as much as its surroundings, but the blades that constituted it could regenerate as many times as was needed. The copious amounts of gray aether Chael was producing allowed that. As the newly regrown fist moved to grab her again, Ruth kicked off the ground with her skeletal boots, giving herself several meters of elevation off the ground. She needed time to come up with a strategy here. Luckily, the monster's full attention wasn't on her. Buddy, you forgot an apostrophe.
Okay, die.
Bruno had swapped with Serena, and the girl was pummeling the Chael Thing's main body with gargantuan swords formed from chunks of the Dawn House's hull. Most of the beast's defenses were being used to protect from skippered ranged assault as well, shields glowing around the main flesh body to block the constant heartbeat shotguns. That left Ruth, the dagger that could slip through those defenses, but she wasn't seeing much in terms of gaps to maneuver through. If she were suicidal, she could run up the side of the creature's body and attack from there. I assume there.
Yeah.
But she was not ready to risk more spikes spreading out and running her through. She was fast, true, but not nearly fast enough to make her confident in that gambit. As gravity pulled her back down, Ruth kicked the steel wrist of the Chael Thing, shattering it and severing the steel fist from the rest of the body. It would regenerate just like the rest of the creature, but that would buy her time she could use to observe and plan. I wonder, could you, jumpstart someone out of an Aether Awakening with, smelling salts? Or, something that would jolt their brain?
Aether
like a shock to
Awakening,
the brain?
once you do it, you're done, pretty much.
Okay. So it's not like a matter of... It's not like a matter of you're still there and you've lost control. You're just, not there.
You're, brain dead.
Oh, damn.
Aether Burn's
just like the rest.
It's like a sliding scale. Aether Awakening's yes or no.
It would regenerate just like the rest of the creature, but that would buy her time she could use to observe and plan. Every idea that popped... Oh, what would happen if Marie Aether burned?
Who can say?
Sorry, I'm getting distracted. Every idea that popped into her head seemed to run into that same impassable wall. Fear. If I do that, I'll get hurt. If I do that, we'll lose. If I do that, my friends will die. A lashed corpse, bones melted by plasma. No. She closed her eyes for a moment, steadying her breathing. She'd been afraid, she knew, for most of her life, afraid of losing what she had, and afraid of being hurt. It wasn't that she'd made her decisions based on that fear. That fear had stopped her making decisions. She'd let others make choices for her, followed their leads without having the courage to decide her own path, to question, to even think! Think, Ruth, think! She'd been afraid of the idea that they'd been fighting for some greater purpose, because that would require her to think about the reason she fought, because it would require her to admit that she didn't really know why. Her ears twitched. Both of the Chael Thing's metal hands were scraping across the deck towards her from opposite sides, as if they were about to begin applauding, with her stuck in the middle. She'd be crushed, sliced to ribbons, reduced to a fine paste, I assume. Yeah. That idea frightened her, but not as much as the idea of always being scared. Ruth opened her eyes. The skeletal gauntlets on her arms switched out in a flash of red aether, being replaced by the arms of her noblesse set, and the second the metal hands made contact, the force was reflected, shattering them into yet another rain of blades. The Chael Thing roared in anger, and further tendrils of blades burst from the main mass, hurling towards Ruth with the intent to eviscerate. No fear. Ruth ran forward as the biggest tendril closed in and jumped on top of it, her skeletal boots giving her just enough speed to outrun the spikes that sprouted up to try and impale her. It was like running across the warping tracks of a roller coaster, the flesh body of the citizen growing larger in her vision as she charged across the metal body. "Ruth!" cried Skipper, far away. He sounded alarmed, but that only made sense. She was acting crazy after all. Once the tendril warped into the right angle, Ruth skidded to a halt and swapped out her skeletal boots for those of the noblesse set as well. Instantly, blades burst up beneath her feet to try and finish her, and the second those spikes came into contact with her new boots, the reflected force launched Ruth directly towards Chael's real body. It was a complex, intricate thing, swapping out her armor like this. As Ruth flew through the air... How does she get her noblesse set back after it breaks, or is she recalling it when that happens?
It recalls, basically.
As Ruth flew through the air, red aether concentrated on her arms, knitting together the skeletal gauntlets she'd previously dismissed. She braced her body, claws pointing right towards Chael as he grew closer. Blades fired out from the monster's... I forgot another apostrophe. Classic. Metal body, cutting at both Ruth's armor and skin, but she'd come too far to let a little pain stop her. A roar escaped her throat as finally she reached Chael and planted both sets of claws right into his chest. The thrashing of the metal body and the blade-forged tendrils came to a sudden and jarring halt, like a videograph that had been put on pause. Chael himself, the real Chael, opened his mouth in a silent scream, blades vibrating inside his eye sockets in sympathy for his pain. Ruth blinked. Almost instantly, as if on some level the monster had been waiting for that moment of weakness, gray aether pooled inside Chael's open mouth. There was the shing of rushing metal, and a long, rigid spike burst out from the back of Chael's throat, its tip aimed right between Ruth's eyes. "Run!" her body told her. "Fight!" her heart said. Chael wasn't the only one who could pull off a final gambit. Ruth gritted her teeth and focused all the aether she had into her left head. And she had left into her head. The rest of her armor disappeared, reduced to tendrils of red light that concentrated around her skull. "Noblesse set!" Her mask vanished, swapping over with the pure white helmet in an instant. At the very instant that Chael's final spike came into contact with it, there was a resounding ding as the tip of the spike slammed into the helmet, and sparks rained down onto the ground below. For a moment, it was as if the entire rest of the world had been put on mute. Even the wind seemed subdued, waiting in anticipation. An unstoppable force had met an immovable object, and the spike vibrated intensely, metal singing as the force of the blow was reflected into it. Even so, Ruth could feel the helmet buckling under the spike's advance, and for a moment she felt almost certain that the blade would keep going right into her forehead. But the choice was already made. All she could do now was keep faith in it. She stared ahead, unblinking at her enemy, listening to the creaking of metal. The creaking stopped, and the spike shattered. The Chael Thing's head snapped back as the spike exploded inside its mouth, sending shards of metal flying inside its body. Its throat opened, its jaw fell free, and the skin of its face was cut to tatters, blood spewing out with reckless abandon, billowing onto the far-off ground like a waterfall. The blades in the beast's eyes shattered too, and as Chael's body flopped over like a stringless puppet, Ruth knew that its brain had surely been destroyed. It was done. Chael's aether didn't take long to dissipate. Before Ruth could even catch her breath, she found herself falling down to the ground. The blades that had made up Chael's massive lower body had disappeared, leaving nothing between her and gravity's tender mercies. The fall to the ground was considerable, and Ruth knew that she wouldn't be landing without at least a few broken bones. There was nothing else for it, though. She'd used all she had in terms of aether. With no other recourse, Ruth curled her body into a ball, bracing herself for impact. She squeezed her eyes shut. This was gonna hurt. "Now's when I come in and look cool. Yeah," chuckled Skipper, voice close. Ruth opened her eyes, and in that same moment, Skipper had caught her. He'd shot up into the air using his heartbeat shotgun, and as the two of them came back down, he shot more out from the soles of his feet to slow their descent. He stumbled and almost dropped her as he landed, but it was still better than the alternative. "I've seen cooler," chuckled Ruth, trying to ignore the pain from the various cuts all over her body. "You're breaking my heart here." Serena skipped up to them as Skipper skidded to a halt, still dragging one of those massive swords behind her. "Miss Ruth," she said in that sing-song voice of hers, "are you okay?" "Yeah," Ruth nodded, only to grimace when even that moment sent waves of pain throughout her body. Even that movement, sorry. No, not really. Hurts like shit." Skipper gulped before glancing over his shoulder at the remnants of the battle. "Well," he said, "you're looking better than the other guy." It was true. There had only been half of Chael to begin with, and now what was left in the crater was even less than that. A broken heap of meat and skin, limbs splayed out unnaturally, entrails flowing freely out onto the deck. As Ruth watched, doing her best to keep her lunch down, the remains of the body were finally swept away by the broiling winds, leaving a slick red trail behind it as it plummeted off the side of the Dawn House. It fell all the way down. "Is it over?" Ruth asked quietly. She found it hard to believe. This whole nightmare had felt all-encompassing for so long. The idea that they'd come out the other side intact seemed almost impossible. When Skipper laughed, though, jubilantly, victoriously, it became much easier to believe. "Yeah," he grinned. "Yeah, we did it. It's over." For a moment, just a moment, despite everything, despite the raging winds and stinging pain, things were peaceful. It was as if the entire universe had agreed to give them just a second to catch their breath. Then there was a deafening clang as a hatch not far away swung open, and Dragon Hadrian poked his head out. His hair and face were stained with fumes, and he blinked blearily as he looked frantically around. "I made it," he panted before erupting into a coughing fit. Again, probably the fumes. Guys, he blurted out once he got the coughing under control. "I have a plan to deal with that thing." He blinked as he saw the strange, about to burst into laughter looks everyone else was giving him. To his credit, he figured it out quickly. "Oh," he said, "it's over?" "Yeah," chuckled Skipper. "It's over." It had much less gravitas the second time. Former Secretary Zhao watched, silent as the Dawn House fell to earth. He'd been drinking in a local bar, drowning his sorrows more likely, when the news had come up on the videographs. The entire crowd had rushed out onto the bar's balcony, watching in a shocked hush as the seat of government plummeted like a shooting star. It had finally come to a stop after slamming into Brink District, lodging itself through several decks and obliterating the financial sector there. Oh, it destroyed Wall Street. Fire and debris was doubtless still raining down on the lower districts, even if it could no longer be seen from here. "Dear, why?" someone in the crowd muttered. It seemed an appropriate sentiment. Most people were silent. Some cried. One person down in the streets below was laughing hysterically, their humorless cackle echoing up. Zhao honestly couldn't say which was the right response. From every balcony on this side of Talden, Zhao could see crowds of people doing nothing but watching. Watching history be made. The script rang, some old song from years ago, and he shakily put it to his ears, still staring at the inferno. The babble from the other end mostly washed over him. He caught phrases such as chain of succession and acting president, but they honestly didn't mean anything to him. He nodded dumbly and occasionally offered an of affirmation. If nothing else, one thing was clear. There was a great deal of work to be done. Yeah, I thought he was going to be like, man, I guess you really did put your money where your mouth was, Chael-sama. But nah. Ah, man, what a chapter.
Yeah, one chapter left in Arc 3.
50-page arc, wow. Can you guys believe it? That means
almost a third of my life.
Almost a third of your story. More than a third of your story. Like 3/5 of your story. But yeah. Well, that was good. That was fun. That was great and all. But here's a world-building question. Do you think Zhao will be a good president?
Who can
and if
say?
so, what do you think the first thing he'll do is, aside from fix the damage? How will he change the world? I just realized in a world, in a universe where there's like multiple planets, like saving the world, changing the world doesn't really have the same ring to it anymore because there's like multiple worlds.
A world.
It's just like a world. I'm saving a world. All right. Well, thanks for watching, guys, or reading if you're on the Royal Road, which in case you didn't hear this, but yeah. Oh, you think you can read yourself? You don't need us to read it to you. Prove it by going to Royal Road Aetheral.
They can't read. My child will ignore.
My child will go and leave a review on Royal Road. Alright, well, anyway, thanks, guys. Bye!
Bye!